Jesus regularly invited people to follow him. His invitation is to a life of rest, not just for our bodies, but at a far deeper level for our souls. And yet his imagery of an easy yoke is a bit odd. A yoke sounds like the last thing a weary, burned out worker needs. But Jesus is wise beyond comparison. He gets better than we do, that life is an unending series of burdens. There's no way around the weight of responsibility of this life. And what we need isn't an escape from that weight, but a way to carry it with ease and joy. And that's what Jesus offers, a way to carry the weight of life with a straight back and a smile on your face. Now, in the way of Jesus, Sabbath is a practice of restful worship by which we can cultivate a spirit of restfulness all week long. And there are Sabbath moments that we can enjoy each day, little opportunities to slow down and rest under Jesus' yoke. Now, the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which literally means to stop. Not just to stop working, but also to stop worrying, to stop wanting, just stop. And Sabbath is more than just a day, a 24-hour period. It's a way of being in the world. It's a spirit of restfulness that comes from abiding, from living in the Father's presence all week long. Which is why the writer of Hebrews wrote that we should make every effort to enter that rest. Work hard to rest well. So Sabbath takes intentionality. It requires planning and preparation. It takes self-control, the capacity to say no to some good things so that we can say yes to the best. And built into the rhythm of Jesus' life was this core practice, an entire day every week set aside to slow down, to stop. But one Sabbath, Jesus got in trouble with the Pharisees, the religious leaders. They took issue with the way that Jesus and his friends were celebrating the day by taking a stroll through a cornfield. And Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." Now, first century Jews needed to hear the second part of that command. Jesus was rebuking the legalistic, guilt-heavy religious culture that was totally missing the Father's heart behind the command to Shabbat once a week. We need to hear the first part, that the Sabbath was made for man. Our culture isn't legalistic and religious at all, but we still need to Shabbat. Jesus' way of stopping taps into a rhythm of grace as old as the earth itself. After 6 days of working hard to get the universe up and running, God rested. That seventh day is a day without end. God's rest is an eternal rest, and he invites his people to share that rest, to delight in creation and to enjoy his finished work. Sabbath is a picture of God's ultimate intentions for his people. Now, we might say, but I'm so busy and I work all week and I just don't have time. I need to catch up on all my jobs. God rested. I'm not really into Sabbath, and anyway, I'm all good. I go to church. God rested. But I've got little kids and it's just not doable just now. Maybe when. God rested. We can fight against this rhythm of working for 6 days and resting for one. But when we do, we go against the grain of the universe. God rested, and in doing so, he built a rhythm into the DNA of creation. A philosopher said, if you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. This rhythm isn't the byproduct of human ingenuity, that we're free to adapt or change as we see fit for the modern era. It's the way a brilliant mind designed our souls and society to thrive and flourish. So if we fight it, we fight God. Shabbat means to stop, but it can also be translated to delight. Sabbath has this dual idea of stopping and also enjoying God and our lives in the world. And if the idea of Sabbath is giving you the collywobbles, if you've got 100 excuses screaming in your head, would you just take a moment to consider what would you do for 24 hours that would fill your soul with joy? If you could do anything, what would you do that would just make you spontaneously combust with wonder and awe and gratitude and praise? The Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. The Sabbath, when experienced as God intended, is the best day of our lives. Few people are willing to enter the Sabbath, to sanctify it and make it holy, because a full day of delight and joy is more than most people can bear in a lifetime, let alone in a week. God invites us to rest, and it's such a lovely, gracious invitation. God's work of creation is complete, and his work of salvation is complete. Jesus cried from the cross, "It's finished." Jesus promised rest, and it's not just a promise of serenity, it's a promise of liberation. God rested, God stopped, God set aside an entire day to delight in his world. Now, in Genesis, God blessed 3 things. He blessed the animal kingdom and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." He blessed humanity and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." And God blessed the Sabbath. He blessed the 7th day and made it holy. So God blessed animals, humans, and a day, meaning that the Sabbath also has life-giving capacity to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the world up with more life. Sabbath is how we fill our souls back up. Now, this would have been stunning to the original audience, because in the ancient Near East, gods were found in holy temples or up holy mountains or at holy shrines. But with this creator God, you didn't have to make a pilgrimage to meet him. You just had to set aside a day each week to Shabbat, to stop long enough to let your souls catch up with your body, for your mind to be where your feet were, for you to experience and enjoy God and his creation in each moment. When we tap into this rhythm of grace, we experience health and life. When we fight this rhythm, ignore it, suppress it, push past it, we reap the consequences. We get emotional, mental, physical, spiritual splinters. And maybe that's why God eventually commanded the Sabbath. There seems to be something about the human condition that makes us just want to hurry and worry our way through life as fast as possible, to even rebel against the limitations of time itself. So when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, Commandment 4 was remember. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Remember that there is a day that is blessed. Remember to take time to delight in it. Remember to be present in the moment and present to its joy. Now, Sabbath isn't the same as a day off. On a day off, you don't work for your boss, but you still work. We do our to-do list, we pay bills, we see films, we shop, we eat out, and it's all good stuff, but it's not Sabbath stuff. Sabbath is for rest and worship. And rest and worship are really broad categories. Easy, free, spacious, non-legalistic. No checklist, no schedule, no formula. Just set aside one day, if you can. I mean, you can do it from like tea time on Friday to late afternoon on Saturday. Or you can take as much time as you can manage on a day that works for you. Set aside time to do nothing but rest and worship. And worship in the holistic sense of the word. Eat your favourite meal. Enjoy a bottle of wine with a leisurely dinner with some friends. Go for a walk through the woods or on the beach. Anything that will turn your heart in grateful recognition towards God's reality and goodness. So 40 years after Moses had given the Ten Commandments to those ex-slaves who had been freed from Egypt, he had to give them again to the next generation. Observe the Sabbath. Observe it by keeping it holy as the Lord your God has commanded. Now that first word is different. Instead of remember, it's now observe. So think about how we observe holidays like Christmas and Easter. We plan for them. We want to make them as special as we can. We approach it with a sense of anticipation. And Sabbath should be like that, but without any of the stress or family tension. But it's not the only difference. In Exodus, the Sabbath command was grounded in creation, in the rhythm that God had built into the world. But in Deuteronomy, the command is grounded in the Exodus, in Israel's freedom from slavery to Pharaoh and his empire. And that's a different reason to Sabbath. So if the first command for Sabbath was rest and worship, the second command was for resistance. And although this was the first generation to grow up in freedom, their parents and grandparents and generations before them had been slaves. Slaves to an empire that had been made by devouring human beings, one pyramid at a time. And like every empire since, the Egyptian empire was built on the back of the oppressed. For luxury fit for a pharaoh, you needed cheap labour. And slaves don't get a Sabbath or a day off. They work every day until they die, just bought and sold as commodities, a means to whatever end the rich and powerful see fit. And Egypt is still alive and well. We live in a culture of more, and just like Egypt, we've built a culture built on the oppression of the poor. And what's more, we've found a way to do it guilt-free. Slavery didn't really end in 1865, we just moved it overseas. There are 28 million slaves in the world today, more than were ever trafficked in the 18th century. And when economists draw an image of the global economic system, they draw a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, with over 45% of the wealth, are 0.7% of humanity. You know, crazy rich people who drive a car, have a computer, and more than one pair of shoes. And at the bottom, 70% of humanity with less than 3% of the wealth. The people who make our socks and shoes and smartphones, many working 7 days a week, many working against their will. Now we are near the top, not the bottom. And that's the tricky thing about Egypt. It's hell if you're a slave, but it's not bad if you're a Egyptian. An Old Testament scholar said Sabbath is an act of resistance, an act of rebellion against Pharaoh and his empire, an insurrection against capitalism and materialism and globalism, all of which make slaves of the poor and the rich. So whenever we hear about social injustice and socio-economic disparity, we can wring our hands and think, ooh, what can I do? Well, we can do nothing for 1 day a week. Imagine if Amazon closed for 24 hours, if websites stopped receiving orders for 1 day, if warehouses fell silent, cafes and shops closed. If we could go a whole day without buying anything, would that create space for the overworked and the underpaid to rest and spend time with their families? Sabbath is a way of saying enough. That's why buying and selling were off limits under the Torah. It wasn't a legalistic rule from the Old Testament that we're now free from. It was a rhythm of grace to break our addiction to the twin gods of accomplishment and accumulation. Accumulation and accomplishment, like money, aren't evil in and of themselves, as long as they don't take advantage of the poor, which they often do. So how much is enough for you? Are you able to draw a line and say, I have enough, I've done enough this week. What I really need now is some time to enjoy what I have with God. Sabbath isn't just a time slot in our weekly schedule. It's a spirit of restfulness that can go with us all through the week. It's a way of living freely and lightly, a way of working from rest with nothing to prove, a way of bearing fruit from abiding. So can I encourage you to look for Sabbath moments, or maybe even take a whole Sabbath day. Come away from screens, turn your phone off and put it in a cupboard, and spend the day, or spend whatever time you've got, delighting in God. Look for things that are restful to you. Look for things that give you an opportunity to connect with God. Instead of being distracted and busy, relax and reach out your mind to God and settle into His rest.